Okay, everyone, this is Laura Glenick, and I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I was waiting to see if some more people would sign in, but they may, but I also realized this is summer, and this is what happens in summer. People take vacation. So we're going to get started. Even though it's summer, we still like getting together for exchanges, and for this State Lead Peer Exchange, we're kind of changing it up a bit, and I think it's kind of cool. We're going to be representing 3 projects, state-level representatives from 3 projects who are going to share some things that they're doing around being workforce employment networks. So before I turn it over to Kevin Nickerson on our team, who's going to play a double role today, he's going to introduce the topic and the presenters. He's also going to join one of the presenters to help talk about some of the numbers, because we love the numbers game. But I just want to start by reminding all of us, what is the State Lead Peer Exchange? So notice in no place did I say what is the DEI, technical assistance, or the NDI team State Lead Peer Exchange. It is literally the State Lead Peer Exchange. And so it really is meant to be your time. We're just facilitating it. We're the vehicle to putting you together. This really, it's an informal, facilitated bi-monthly, doesn't always run bi-monthly, but we try to hold one in between the months in which there is a project leads admin call. And during the call, we have an individual state lead, or in the case of today, we have 3 who really talk about a specific practice that is effective in helping a project achieve DEI outcomes. And after the presentation, we have time for discussion of the topic and an opportunity to talk with your peers. And really what we're trying to do is, just like in the employer community, remember under the DPN initiative, we always heard from navigators. Employers want to hear from their peers. And that was the most effective kind of technical assistance that could be given. And we feel the same among states. When DRCs have the opportunity to talk to DRCs, and also state leads to talk to other state leads, talking about what's working and what's not, what are the challenges, and what are the effective strategies that you're putting in place. And so that's what we're all about here today to talk about. We have our logistics, but the logistics are really open to everybody. Okay, something just happened. Okay, I'm not sure what that was, but the logistics are just here open to everybody. And you can, throughout the presentation, you can submit questions in the chat box, and we'll raise them at the end. I'm not going to mute anybody's phone lines. We're just going to keep them unmuted. At least we'll try that from the beginning. You do have the ability to self-mute your own phone line, but we want to keep them open, and I would say, and I'll leave this up to Kevin, but if you have a burning question, put it in the chat box, or maybe raise your hand throughout the presentations so we can call on you. But again, this is meant to be your time, and so we're just a vehicle to open up this discussion for you to learn from your peers. And so with that, I'm going to get this party started by turning it over to Kevin Nickerson, again with the DEI Technical Assistance team, who's going to tell us a little bit more about who you're going to be hearing from today and what they're going to be sharing. And Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Laura. You can hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, I'm glad to be here today with all of you, and I hope each of you are enjoying your summers. I am kind of excited about today's call because we get to discuss one of my favorite topics, and that would be serving Social Security disability beneficiaries through the Ticket to Work program. As you all know, operating ENs is one of the DEI components that all of the state projects have in common. And the DEI TA team thought it would be helpful to share some highlights of DEI-related EN activity on today's call. But before I turn things over to our presenters, I thought I'd share a few interesting facts with you. I don't know if you all know, but maybe you don't. Did you know that there are a number of workforce ENs represented in the top 20 performing ENs in the nation, and even some in the top 10? We want to give kudos to the states of Florida, Iowa, and New York for running workforce ENs that are currently leading the nation. If we count all of the current active ENs, you'll find 79 workforce ENs that represent DEI rounds 1 through 4. The data from SSA as of March 2014 noted the DEI ENs assigned 1,895, or 41% of the total tickets assigned to workforce ENs nationally. At the end of December 2013, 46% of the DEI ENs from rounds 2, 3, and 4 had both tickets assigned and payments, which represented 31% of all workforce ENs. Not bad, considering nearly half of the DEI ENs have been in operation for 2 years or less. So today we have 3 DEI state leads that were selected to speak to all of us as peers about a specific topic related to EN operations in their pilot regions. We'll hear about Partnership Plus from the Alaska DEI project, followed by EN data results from Virginia's DEI project and some from New York. That's where I'll share some of the stage. And then the Louisiana DEI project will wrap up the presentation about effective marketing efforts within and outside of the HACs. And with that, I think I will turn the presentation over to Nikki Powis from the Alaska DEI project. Nikki, it's all yours.
Thanks, Kevin, and hi, everybody. It's great to be on it, and the sun is shining in Alaska, so that's always a good thing. So if, Laura, you want to go ahead and go to the first slide for me? Great. So there's a nice picture of Alaska. So those of you that haven't been, it's absolutely beautiful. So I don't actually have a slide on the historical information, but I realized as I was looking through, you know, what we were going to talk about, that I probably needed to give you a little bit of background. So we're going to just be able to look at that pleasing mountain view for a few minutes while I just kind of back up before I get started on what the slides actually say. We are a DEI round 4 state, and we were a round 1 state as well. And under round 1, we didn't have a whole lot of activity under Partnership Plus. And so really we've only been doing this since sort of last October when we got the round 4 grants. And we sort of really got going because I have to give kudos to Kevin Nickerson and also Marilyn Robois. They did a training for us in the latter part of 2013 and used the calculator and sort of really gave us an opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, this thing could work and this makes a lot of sense. I think before that we hadn't really sort of considered it that much and hadn't really looked into why it made sense. So after doing that and just sort of having that aha moment that this is a complete win-win and it's best for everybody, we met with the VR director to kind of get a sense of what the current reimbursement levels were that they were getting from Social Security, the number of closures that they had that were at or above SGA, and sort of really got some buy-in to how we could work together and improve their bottom line as well as help the beneficiaries and consumers. And so I think it was sort of an aha moment for all of us because the VR director said, didn't really think about it that way and didn't really think about how it could help us, which was sort of surprising that nobody had really considered that. So sometimes the simplest of things that you sort of assume that people already know and already are aware of become these sort of ahas that really change everything and get that momentum going. So after that, we met with all the VR offices and all the counselors statewide. We got buy-in from the director that we could meet with the overall chief of field operations for the state of Alaska for the VR offices. And he was immensely helpful and actually was going to join me on today's teleconference, but ended up getting called away to another meeting, which I was sad about because I think it's nice to get the VR perspective and have somebody to be able to ask questions of. So I'm sorry he wasn't here. But anyway, so, you know, we did get the buy-in, we got the go-ahead, and so as a result of that relationship building there, we then were able to go and talk to every single office, every single counselor. I actually traveled around to all of them and sat down with them and kind of identified that there were some pretty incorrect assumptions going around, and that I sort of mistakenly thought that I was the rookie and everybody in VR already knew exactly what Partnership Plus was, and they all thought it was brilliant, but I found out quickly that that wasn't the case, so there was some sort of sharing of information there. A lot of the VR counselors felt like we were in competition for the money, so we had to sort of squash and bust some of those myths out there. And they also had some concerns about, well, you know, what could the job centers do? What could we, as they sort of considered us to be the non-disability experts, how could we be beneficial to the customers? So once we sort of got through some of that and really were able to get on an even playing field of how it really did help the beneficiary, and all the things that we could offer, and that we were not competing for the money and we weren't taking anything away from them. In fact, we were adding to it by being able to assist people with working for the length of time they needed to after closure for them to get the reimbursement in the first place. It was, again, another aha moment where everybody got on board, and then we all jointly designed the customer flow, got buy-in from everybody, and then sort of designed what our assumptions now are, which if you want to go to the next slide, Laura, that'd be great. So now sort of jointly between VR and all of the DRCs and the job centers through, you know, training and education and everything, we've identified that we have the assumption that the beneficiary is better off and they have a better chance of success with that continuum of services, so that they do flow straight into us right after VR, and actually oftentimes before they actually close from VR. That collaboration across VR and job center services is a best practice. And I don't know, you know, what other VR state offices do, but the Alaska VR system relies pretty heavily on what they call CRPs, which is certified rehab providers that they pay under contract to do a lot of the sort of job development and job search process. And, you know, what was identified was that with this collaboration, we can actually not only help VR gain some more reimbursements from Social Security, but we can also save them some money with their contracted work that they're doing, because the American Job Centers do all the things that they were paying these certified rehab providers to do anyway. So we've actually now got several job centers that are being used as sort of employment trial sites where some VR consumers are trying out work, and they're getting paid through VR to do that in our offices in different capacities. They're, you know, referring them now to the American Job Centers, to the DRCs, so that we can help with the job search process and help connect them with employers and the things that we do anyway, that they were oftentimes paying someone else to do. So that was a big collaboration and something that was really working. And then working together from the start of the job search process, providing more access to services. So again, sort of to expand on that, the fact that we don't wait until the case is closing and then let the beneficiary know, oh, by the way, these ENs are available. We get involved in a much earlier time frame, depending, and that's very individually based, but you know, depending on when the person actually starts the job search process. And then that relationship is built with the beneficiary. They're comfortable. They know who we are. They've come into our offices. We've gone to them at the VR offices. And then, you know, the other thing is the in-person introduction and handoff between the VR and EN staff being a more effective strategy. So our DRCs will actually go to a meeting at the VR office. And we are lucky. I don't know, again, how many states have this, but in Alaska, a lot of our job centers are co-located with VR offices, so a lot of times it's in the same building. Sometimes it's not, but in a lot of areas it is. And so the VR person will just invite the DRC to come in and join the meeting so they can introduce them, get to know each other, kind of take a look at what the plan is, find out what pieces and parts we can do to help the person get employed in the first place, so then you're establishing that relationship from the onset of the job search process. And then, of course, now we all understand the assumption that the financial benefit through SSA reimbursement and payments is, for both agencies, increased. We're not in competition. They're going to get a higher level of reimbursement, and they've actually already seen that. And, you know, we're going to get those payments. And then the other big thing is that effective collaboration, communication, and ongoing continuous improvement is going to really ensure that process integrity and better customer service. So we meet on a regular basis. We have a joint statewide meeting where VR counselors participate, and our business connection team will participate and talk about upcoming job opportunities, and the VR folks will sort of have, you know, bring a person, as it were, not you know, in live, but, you know, in their heads who might be good, and so they have that collaboration. Our DRCs are going to VR staff meetings. They're getting together with counselors and sort of looking at caseloads, identifying. That was one of the things we did, was that the VR system agreed to go and take a look at all the caseloads and look at all the people that they've got currently on their caseload that are receiving Social Security or SSI, and take a look and see, you know, who would be a good fit. Are we nearing closure? Are we getting to a job search stage? Where do we need to bring you in, and what? So that still exists, that still goes on. People still meet on a regular basis and do joint planning. And of course, you know, we can continue with that plan that's been put in place beyond the closure. And so if you want to, Laura, go to the next slide. So this just is a little bit, and I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to talk quickly now. But this is just a little bit that sort of shows the flow of how things work. So someone will come in, they'll begin the VR services. And, you know, right at the beginning, what the counselors told us is that they are planning for closure right from day one. And so they're talking about what will happen when the case closes, the continuum of services, so they can talk about the EN aspect right from the beginning, so that it sort of becomes, for the beneficiary, just part of the course of what they know they're going to be doing as they go along the continuum. I mean, it might be 2 years from now, but they've heard EN. They know what we can do right from the beginning, so it's not sort of some big surprise at the end when the closure conversation happens. And then during the job search phase, I already mentioned, you know, the introduction, so that we can do what we do best and help people look for work. And then nearing the case closure, again, there'll be the conversation about the EN services and arrange a meeting with the DRC so that the folks can meet and decide if that's, you know, obviously remaining constantly that it is a personal choice and deciding whether or not the person wants to continue to do that. In all the case closure letters now, Alaska sends out case closure letters to all their beneficiaries, and included in that is information about how to contact us. We have a flyer with all the localized information on it, so depending on where the person lives, they'll get their local DRC information. And then if they, you know, choose to begin assigning their ticket, then obviously we develop the IWP, and then we hopefully start receiving the Phase 2 payments or outcome payments as eligible, and then VR receives cost reimbursement once the beneficiary has worked for the period of time that they need to, and we can make sure that they, you know, retain their employment, because, you know, VR closes at 90 days, as everybody knows, and so they're not at that point ready for reimbursement yet. They haven't worked long enough. So, you know, we're right there to make sure that they stay working and connect with post-employment services or whatever is needed. So if you go to the next slide, Laura, this is just a picture on the next slide of the post-employment flyer that goes into all the closure letters and is actually shared sometimes earlier depending on the situation. So that's a little overview of where we've got to where we are right now. We went from 0 Partnership Plus referrals to now about 25% of our assigned tickets are coming from VR referrals. So we're pretty happy with that so far, and it's increasing. So, okay, I'm done.
Well, thanks, Nikki. This is Kevin again, and I just got to say, I remember that first call and being impressed with just the coordination of all the folks that you got in that room when we first had the opportunity to throw some numbers at them, and to where you are now is just very impressive. Now, Laura, just to sidetrack me here if I'm wrong, but we didn't put any place in between these presentations for questions, but I thought maybe it'd be better to do. Do you want to wait to the end, or can we?
Yeah, Kevin, it's your preference. So
okay. I would prefer that we then maybe look at any questions for Nikki now that this is fresh, and we can just jump in if anybody has anything to ask Nikki.
Yeah. Now, again, none of your phones are muted, so you could either raise your hand or just kind of speak up.
Nikki, I have a question for you. This is Kevin.
Okay.
You know, I meant to do a check before the call to see if there are other, you know, ENs in the area, but, you know, just looking at the perspective of, you know, choice, and I first of all, I love what's going on here, but how does VR handle, you know, and this has been a concern with other states, I know, you know, that, you know, referring somebody to maybe your EN versus maybe another private EN or so forth?
Well, we are in the unique opportunity that the workforce centers are the only ENs in Alaska right now. We're actually working with a collaborative to try and change that, because we recognize that we're not going to be the best EN for every single person. I mean, we cannot offer long-term supported employment. And so for some of the DD population and folks that are going to need that ongoing under a Medicaid waiver or something, you know, we're probably not the best place for them. So actually our local DD provider in Juneau, in our capital city, has just applied to become an EN, so we're excited about that. So, you know, in that case, I think the workforce centers can still be beneficial even if they're not assigning a ticket, obviously. And so, you know, I don't think we're going to have too much trouble with worrying about that, because it is always consumer driven and consumer choice, and we can be helpful, and then we can say, you know, this opportunity is here, or just offer the spectrum of services. But we are pretty unique, because right now there isn't another choice unless they can go with a national EN, and they do give them that information as well.
They do provide that?
Yeah, they do provide that. You know, they do tell them that there is a choice. But, you know, most people are going to want to have a live body, and they're going to want to talk to a person and sit down across the table. So, you know, people haven't really chosen to do that, but they do make that available. So we're not, you know, we're not sort of cornering the market, and we do say if it doesn't make sense and that we're not going to be the best place for them. But as we increase our agencies that apply for and become ENs, then, you know, we'll probably have to shift the way we do things slightly.
Well, that's a great response, though, that you hope that others join the party, because you know that you can't do everything for all people, and I think that's so true.
Yeah, definitely.
What a great relationship, and I appreciate what you've shared with us. If there's no questions at this time, I think we'll move on then. Next is Sinclair Hubbard from Virginia, and I'll share a little bit of information with her, but I'm going to let Sinclair take it away at this time.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, and happy cloudy day in the Shenandoah Valley to everybody. We don't have the sun shining today, but that's okay, because it's a little cooler, and we're appreciating that fact. We don't have any pretty pictures like Alaska. I'm sorry. Kevin and I are numbers driven, so I'm afraid we have to show you a chart. Doggone it. Anyway, we're using this chart to share employment network stats with you all that show some conclusions, we hope, to our peers. And these were basically really gathered to examine patterns, not to do as any kind of comparison, because obviously Virginia is not the size of New York. We'll find that out in just a minute. If I can just add a couple things to these numbers as you're looking at them, we wanted to make sure that people understood that New York had 26 DRCs and Virginia had 7. So that, you know, not only just the size of our states are very different, but the size of our folks providing the services were very different. However, what we do want to significantly emphasize here is the fact that even once the round 1 was ending, we still were seeing an increase in more revenue coming in, and we also saw more outcomes being outcome statuses showing up in our data. So, for example, in Virginia, I had WIB directors coming up to me in meetings and saying, I just got another $10,000. I can't believe this. And so we ended up with another $30,000 in the last quarter. So that was like the last 3 months of our grant. And in New York, they were able to go back and look at their data and saw that they had 6 more customers enter outcome status. So we want you to understand that this is not ending data. This is evolving data. You know, it will continue to evolve over time. And I'm going to make one final point here and then turn this over to Kevin to explain all these numbers to you. But one of the things that I think made both of our projects very successful was the fact that we really looked at an individualized process for our customers, and we assessed those folks that we felt could be of benefit from the resources and the services that each of our ENs offered. And not every employment network could offer all the same things. For example, some employment networks had more to offer in an urban setting than they had in a rural setting. But what we had to look at was exactly, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but look at what the customers' employment goals were, and we wanted to assess their ability to work full-time, and then we wanted to just focus on providing that customer with any kind of leverage resources or services that would help them meet their employment goal. And in doing that, I think that we did have some very good successes. And with that being said, I'm going to turn the data piece over to Kevin to explain to you what this chart is all about.
Awesome. Thanks, Sinclair. Well, this may just look like one slide, one chart, and but I got to say there was a lot of effort behind pulling these stats together. But I got Sinclair to play along because she rolls that way, and I appreciate that, Sinclair. And we were both, you know, using similar products to track data, and really, you know, each of the sites were very carefully tracking everything that was going on in the ticket. So most of this is self-explanatory, but let's just highlight some things. Again, this was not really, this is not about a competition among sites. This is about a comparison to see if there was patterns that existed based on, you know, similar models of service that we were providing. And I think we were, despite the different sizes of our states. So as you can see, there's more, you know, active tickets assigned. And what we did here, just so you know, is we only looked at tickets. We tried to look at this by the end of the project. So that's what we did. Now we didn't count tickets that were unassigned. We only looked at tickets assigned at the time that we collected the data. So obviously there's a difference. There was a lot more sites in New York and so forth. But what was more compelling here is to look at, and what was interesting to me is how many of the folks that we assigned ended up in some kind of pay status. So that's the total in any payment status. That could be phase 1, phase 2, or outcomes. Okay? So those percentages we're looking at in the next column over of those in pay, 30.5% and almost 20% there, is I think pretty healthy numbers. And what we're trying to see here is, you know, are the things that we're doing providing us higher percentages of folks that achieve some result in this program? And that comes back to assessment. And again, Sinclair said we'll highlight that a little more, but I do think that was a big piece of the puzzle here. And it isn't any different than what we've you know, kind of presented in other ways. And in fact, we have the ticket assessment guide that really followed this model here. Now, to me, the next column over there, thank you, Laura, for pointing this out, total and outcome status. Now that, to me, that looks like a small number, but I think, you know, you've heard me speak and Mary Lynn enough to know that, you know, outcome status is what it's about, isn't it? That when people are in outcome status, that means they're off benefits completely. They're not receiving any federal cash benefits. Doesn't mean they might not still be connected to health insurance, and we want them to be. But this piece is really the goal of the ticket program. So when we look at this, that doesn't look like a huge number, but you know, I think those well, let's see, 50 people between us would say something different about how important it was, the work we did in our projects. Now that percent to the right of that really shows you a reflection of the total that ended up in outcome status. And to me, this is really this is the end result. This is the goal. This is what we're trying to achieve. And when we look at you know, 7 to 9%, and I gotta speak to that too, because you know, I've been around this program for a long time, since it started actually, and I don't think there really was any set standards for stats or anything at that time. So I kind of got into a mold years ago in the product that I developed. Now, some of you are using the Ticket Data Manager, where I would compare the total payments and those that we got in outcome. OSM actually uses a different measure, so I wanted to highlight that this is a reflection of actual dollars. It's a percentage of the actual dollars achieved in outcome status. So if we use the OSM formula here, our percentages would be far higher. I mean, it would probably be 40, 50%. So because what they do is they look at the total number of payments in outcome. We looked at, in this data for you today, the percentage of the whole of the dollars received. So don't compare this to other data. I probably should switch that. That's a habit I got in 2 years ago prior to them even collecting these kind of stats. And then the last column, you know, I think is also a little unfair, because there was a number of sites in New York that had a foothold. In fact, the one that I started in about 2001 was in the mix. So we didn't count historic dollars for sites that existed, but certainly if you've got sites that exist that have already gotten that foothold, they're already ahead of the game. So again, I hope this shows you that you know, that's quite a bit of activity in a short period of time, and that's, you know, 50 people doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, we've talked about, you know, and I know numbers can prove whatever you want in many cases, but the GAO has done a report on the cost savings and the return on investment, and it's pretty staggering what one person that's able to move to self-sufficiency saves in terms of payments over their lifetime. So it can be huge dollars. So it's a small number, but that small number represents a huge shift in these lives anyway, these 50 lives in our two projects. So that's really the stats. That's what we wanted to collect, and we used all similar processes to collect this. And it's because our sites were so careful about collecting all this information that we were even able to put this together. Laura, I'll have you flip to the next slide here, and I'm going to turn it back to Sinclair.
All right, and if I could just add one comment about what Kevin was saying, that obviously they had one site that had been in the program prior to the DEI starting, and we did too. But the other thing that Kevin had me do was look individually at every one of our DRCs and their employment networks. And I really think it was because of that assessment piece that we had folks, the outcome status didn't come from just our site that already had history. And the outcome statuses didn't come from just Kevin's site, the previous site that he had. So what we're trying to be realistic with you all here is talk about the fact that there were challenges to this, but that there also were successes. And we want you to be able to see that piece of it and understand the reality. And the reality was there was a delayed startup. Virginia didn't start DRCs until March through July. It was New York that did February through March. That part I don't think slowed us up quite as much as the time frame to get our approval for our EN services. I don't know how many people on the call are new with this, but filling out the paperwork to apply and be approved for services is not an easy task. It's gotten easier. I can tell you, being around 4 right now, one of our WIBs utilized Mary Lynn to help them dot their I's and cross their T's, and the approval process went much faster than the first time around. The other piece of this that does take time is the extensive security clearance piece, and all I can say with that is follow the prescriptive instructions. If it says to dot an I before you cross your T, please dot your I before you cross your T. If you do it the opposite way, it will get knocked back and you'll have to start over. And we've seen this happen multiple times. The next piece that was challenging was the learning curve. And I think this is one of the things that probably was the largest hill for us to really get over. And it was to really understand that not only did we have a challenging population, we had a challenging system, meaning the Social Security system, the whole process, the regulations, the policies and the procedures and security clearances and all of these pieces with the ultimate goal of getting a customer employed. So what Virginia did was we enlisted every resource that was available to us. We enlisted training. We had our DRCs take all the trainings that they could possibly take on the DEI website that was provided by NDI. we had Kevin Nickerson become a regular at our DRC meetings to provide targeted trainings to us, along with Brian Ingram, our technical assistance liaison. And then our DRCs got so used to having some more, I guess, intensive consultations that they would call Kevin on specific cases, because we wanted to make sure that we were picking the folks that really were going to make it and wanted to make it, so that we could make sure that it was successful for both ends. You know, we had to make this work. And then the final piece of this was the time frame, and that kind of encapsulates everything that we're saying above, but there are all of these different pieces for the ticket program that have to be fine-tuned, whether it is a rule or a regulation or security clearance or being able to fit into the business model of that employment network, that WIB area, getting folks to understand how that works, getting people to understand how to make referrals. Some people say, well, how do you get your customers? And I say it depends on your area. You know, everything is really individualized in that sense. So basically just kind of summing up that there were challenges, and I don't know if, Kevin, you want to add anything to this particular slide, or do you want to move on to the next one?
I think you said it beautifully, Sinclair. I think those were excellent points. I will say I really appreciated having the opportunity to be invited and to work at that level with Virginia and some other states at that time. And you know, that's an invitation that still stands for those that are here today.
Well, it was very helpful to us to have somebody who had already been there, you know, kind of walk us through how some of these things work. And the other piece, I guess, I'm sorry, Laura, we can go on to the next slide. The other piece I'm going to add real quickly here, Kevin, before I hand this over to you to the first two pieces is in Virginia, we also realized that the pieces that we had to do in terms of dealing with individual cases that were getting bogged down in the system or payments that were getting bogged down and we weren't getting those. So we ended up hiring a consultant who went to bat for us and did a lot of troubleshooting for individual cases and got cases that had basically not had their tickets assigned, and then we got them assigned. And then there were instances where the payments had not come through, and this individual was able to go to bat for us and work individually on those specific cases to find out where the glitches were and solve them so that it made everybody happy when the revenue started coming in. With that, let me go ahead and start talking about promising practices, and I'm going to hand this over to Kevin for a couple minutes here.
Okay. Well, we talked a little bit earlier about the use of individualized assessment, and you know, that's always something that I've been a fan of. I think that really, you know, our training reveals that too. That you know, really, the ticket program is for folks that have certain needs, and I think you know everybody's unique. So what we have to do is look at each person individually, and you can't just look at the person either. You have to look at the EN and the model that you have, right? And that's something that we lay out in the guide. But in practice, what this really means is somebody comes in and they're looking for support, and I think we have to look at what their interests and support needs are. Really, I think what this is, folks, when I talk about this assessment, is it's how are we resourcing our customers, right? We talk about resource coordination. That's really what this is. That's at the heart of assessment. So, you know, I like what Nikki said, because she said they get involved in cases where VR has an open case early. So in that case, VR is the primary. It doesn't mean that we can't still be the partner. And that's often the case when we find that somebody has a greater need. Let me give you a real-life example. So somebody comes in, and I'll make it a real obvious example. Maybe somebody who is a wheelchair user, and they're wanting to get back to work, and they have all the skills necessary to get back to work, really. But they just got a vehicle, and they want to use that vehicle to drive to a new job, and it needs modification. So that's a real obvious example why we would refer that person to VR, our partner, and get them that resource, because we know VR has a lot more ability to provide somebody the resources to modify a vehicle than we would, right? It doesn't mean we exit the scene. we become a partner in that situation, just like Nikki described in Alaska. So that's an example of, sort of an assessment. I'm simplifying for today's purposes, but we would look at the need and really decide, is this person's needs, can we provide the services based on the person's needs? And if we can become the primary. And often that's really the decisions we're making when we assign a ticket or we make a referral and become a partner in the process. I do think that what was really helpful, and in fact what I did in my lead role under round one with New York, was I worked very closely with our sites initially to get them a sense of, how to look at assessing folks that are right for the ticket program and right for the service model we provide. And then it didn't take long, and then they were doing their own thing, and that same process rolled out nicely in Virginia and many other states. The next point, and then I'll turn it back to Sinclair, is that ticket holders were informed. I think we both agreed that with both of our projects, not only were ticket holders informed of the goal of the ticket program, right? If somebody needs part-time, and they're very well informed about benefits and they want to work part-time, it's probably not going to make the grade for ticket, right? So this, again, kind of ties into the assessment, right? But they're very much informed about what the goals of the program were. The other piece that was really similar in both of our projects, as we thought this through, was the strength of benefits and work incentive advisement that people received. It definitely runs strong in Virginia and also in New York. In New York, in fact, we required each of the DRCs to be trained and certified as benefits and work incentive specialists. Not that they were always, not that they were initially happy about that, okay, but ultimately they found that this really strengthened the ability to not only assess but to serve folks. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to go there as long as that service is in play. But we definitely, both Sinclair and I, as we thought this through, felt that was a common trait amongst our project, and one that really was one of the cornerstones, I think, of the success that we saw. Sinclair, you have some other thoughts on this, don't you?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that I really think because a lot of the DRCs had that benefits piece behind them, when they were meeting with a customer, they could allay people's fears immediately. It was more of a real-time guidance session, and not have to wait until they could refer them to someone who did know how to talk about these kinds of things and what was needed. And I think the other piece of this to add too, Kevin, when we're talking about assessing people and making sure that our services and resources would fit their employment goals, we're not talking about easy folks. We're not talking about picking the cream of the crop. And let me give you an example here. One of our DRCs met a customer at the DRC. I guess the customer actually walked into the center because somebody told her about it, but she had moved from another state. She was living out of her car, unemployed, homeless. She could not even get into one of the places that they tried to have shelters because you had to have an address, and she didn't have one. So they had to go to a more intensive shelter where you didn't have to have an address, but you could use it as your address. The individual needed clothes. She needed all sorts of things, and she didn't have a GED. She needed the DRC to help her sign up for SNAP for the supplemental nutrition program. She needed to have clothes for interviews when she was starting to interview. She needed help signing up with a temporary agency so she could actually make some money so that she could then get into a temporary, one of those hotels that you can stay in for longer than a week, that kind of place. And then eventually, if we roll it fast forward down the lane here, she did become employed. She did get housing, and she became a permanent resident of Virginia, because when you take it all full circle, the DRC also had a My Free Taxes program going on at the Workforce Center, and she ended up getting her taxes done at the center the first year she was basically putting in for taxes for the state of Virginia. So it's not you're not necessarily picking the easy cases, but you're definitely picking ones that will be a success story in the long run. And I think that's one of the things that we really implored with our DRCs, that, in your professional judgment, is this person going to make it? Do we have the resources and the services necessary to help them be successful? And if we take that piece of it and move on to sustainability, I think that that was between the assessment piece and promoting the hope of a better life. I think that that's what made these things successful, and I think because we were able to get state-level backing with our project co-directors on making this program important and getting the proper training that we needed, we were able to look at this in a way that truly did focus on the success of the customer and kind of took some of the pressure off the DRCs about these other pieces, you know, those other little details I was talking about with the security clearances and things like that. And one other example I wanted to give in terms of geographic region, because one of the things I think some folks may look at and say, okay, well, you know, Northern Virginia, you've got Northern Virginia and the Virginia area, and yes, that was one of our employment networks, and yes, they do have a lower unemployment rate, and yes, that DRC was successful, and she brought in a goodly amount of revenue. But if you look at our little rural area down in Southwest Virginia, where the labor market showed the DRC that the most fruitful jobs in that area, truck drivers and CNAs. So she would meet with her customers and say, I have looked at this, and if you really want a job other than McDonald's or Walmart or other places that might potentially have an opening in their area, and they had a very high unemployment rate, then she was able to get people jobs all the time. She really was. And that was the area where the WIB director walked into me in the first 3 months of this year and said, we got $10,000 more. They brought in almost $40,000 now in revenue. So it's possible whether you're a rural or an urban region. If you direct and target your efforts, I think you can be successful. And in both Virginia and New York, we were able to sustain our ticket-to-work services in more than half of our employment networks, our WIB area employment networks, which I think was really successful considering all the delays and challenges that we had beginning this program. Kevin, do you have any other comments on this slide?
No, I think you wrapped it up nicely.
All right. Well, let's go to lessons learned. We've come a long way in the past 10 years. If you look back at this program, we really have. And here's what we think makes it work. It does take time, and ticket services can have a place in the workforce centers and the WIB areas and American Job Centers when we tailor them to fit that center. So one area I heard, the lady from Alaska talk about that, you know, not all the American Job Centers do long-term services. So if that doesn't fit your area, then you've got to make it a partnership set up with somebody else who's going to do the long-term piece, those kinds of things. But you can have ticket services be tailored to fit the business models and the career services at a center. It does take time to develop, and I think because we tapped into Kevin's experience from before, it helped us. It takes time to get people trained, to have dedicated staff at these centers, and those who want to be able to provide this kind of service. And also, ticket revenue can support the positions or part of the positions with the leveraging local commitments. In one area, we had a DRC be converted back to a WIA case manager. In another area, we had a employment network WIB area contract with a local EN to continue their ticket-to-work services. So there's varying ways that the services can continue once the Disability Employment Initiative comes to an end. And the final thing I'd like to say, and I think Kevin will echo this with me, we've been around long enough with these disability employment initiatives and other workforce grants that we definitely can see a heightened awareness in all American Job Centers that now welcome all customers. And I can say that before, there wasn't always that awareness at the centers. Kevin and everybody else, thank you.
Well said, Sinclair. I think many, outside that aren't familiar with that trajectory we've been on might say, might have a different opinion about the progress. But when you've seen it over a number of years,
why weren't you doing it all along?
Yeah, exactly.
We've been working on it.
Yeah. So I appreciate that perspective and your time and effort on this, Sinclair, and I want to hold on questions now because the time is running short, and I want to get to Georgette from Louisiana to review some of their marketing strategies. Georgette, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kevin, and I will be quickly as possible. We are limited on time. I'm going to simply just give you all a brief overview of some of the effective strategies that we have found to be very beneficial here in Louisiana as it relates to marketing the Ticket to Work in our EN. So, Laura, you can go on to the next slide. Okay, so how is the Ticket to Work program marketed? Simply, we outreach to not only employers, but of course, not only to job seekers, but of course to the employers as well. So we have networking opportunities, and when I say networking opportunities, our DRCs are very involved with job and resource fairs. Some employers also have what we call business after-hours events. So we are very active with our networking opportunities. Some additional marketing strategies we use, of course, are formal presentations, and these are speaking engagements with entities such as the Chamber of Commerce, faith-based organizations, some of our providers. Also with electronic media. Here at Workforce Commission, I'm certain with some of the other states, you all have a website, so we marketed the ticket program through the website and also through our email list. And finally, through our staff meetings. Now, we do understand that the center staff or the frontline staff, these are the first people that the individuals who come into the job centers see. So, of course, we need to make certain that at all times and whatever opportunity we have that we are making certain that our center staff are trained on the Ticket to Work program and understand the basics of the program and understand how to refer someone who receives SSI or SSDI to the DRC. So these are 4 of the different marketing tools that we use here: networking, formal presentations, electronic media, and of course the staff meetings. Laura, you can click on to the next one. Back up. Okay, so this is just a simple chart. Referrals from the center staff. So if a customer comes in and they receive general services just like any other customer, if the job center staff discovers that the customer is an SSI or SSDI beneficiary, the center staff will share the Ticket to Work orientation flyer or provide them with a letter regarding the services available at the one-stop. If the customer is not interested in Ticket to Work services, of course, the customer continues to receive all of the services just as any other customer would. However, if the customer is interested in the Ticket to Work services, the job center staff continues to provide those services, and that customer is also will be referred to the DRC. So, Laura, you can click on to the next one, and we'll just look at once the referral is made. If available, the DRC will meet with the customer to explain the services and assess the customer to see if they are a potential Ticket to Work intake person, client. If not, if the DRC is not available, the customer is informed that they will be contacted by the DRC to share information and, of course, to answer questions. So once we've marketed everything, we have the center staff making the referrals. What happens next? And you can go on, Laura, and we pretty much know this. Of course, we have the pre-ticket assignment, and, of course, that's where we do our Ticket to Work, orientation, personal appointment, and what's involved in a personal appointment, as you all know, of course, is the intake process, the assessment. We discuss the benefits planning. We'll complete an IWP, and this is where all of our active resource development and referrals are made. And next, what happens with post-ticket assignment? Of course, the DRCs will monitor the IWP progress, job search support, resume development. We always encourage our job seekers to attend all type of hiring events, job fairs. And the main goal, of course, is to secure employment, and once employment is secure, we continue to provide them with a supportive, any type of support maintaining employment. So I think I did that pretty quickly, Kevin. If anyone
no problem. Well done, Georgette. I actually remember being on the TA office hours and hearing you talk about some of the uses of some of the electronic media and so forth, and I was always impressed. So very, very well laid out. Thank you. And now, does anybody have any questions for Georgette, or since we passed over Sinclair and I, any questions from that presentation as well? Don't be shy.
Kevin, this is Sinclair. I have a question for Georgette.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, first I'm going to tell you, I'm going to steal the slide where you have the marketing slide where you show the different ways that you're marketing.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind, but I'm letting you know now I'm going to take that slide.
And I have slides if you need some more too, Sinclair.
Oh, good, good. The one thing I want to just flush out here a little bit, because I think it's something that's sometimes delicate and interesting to have a conversation with frontline staff, but in terms of customers coming in the front door, how do you determine they are a ticket holder? Do you say outright, are you a ticket holder, or how do you all do that?
No, once frontline staff or the frontline staff is working with that particular person, or we give the staff a lot of training on disability etiquette and some of the things to look for. So if the staff can kind of see that maybe this person may receive SSI or SSDI, or simply while they're helping them and they notice something, you know, then they'll ask, then have, you know, do you receive SSI or SSDI? Or if they check it on the actual one of the questions is if you receive SSI or SSDI as well when they're doing their application and intake process.
And that's for WIA, correct? When
correct.
That happens, right. But if you're just registering for Wagner-Peiser, that question's not asked. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because I know that one of the things that we ran into under round one was if we asked customers, are you a ticket to work holder? And they would look at us and say, I don't even know what you're talking about, you know.
Right, exactly.
This is Nikki. I was going to jump in and say that we do, in our centers, we have an initial little intake sign-in sheet that's for Wagner-Peiser, you know, services as well. And that does ask the customer whether they're receiving SSI or SSDI. Because you're totally right. They don't know what a ticket holder is. And sometimes I find they don't even know what benefits they're getting. But they usually do.
They just get a check.
Yeah, exactly. But they at least know that it comes from Social Security. So sometimes that's helpful. But
And I will say, Sinclair, the technical term for borrowing Georgette's slide would be what my colleague Miranda Kennedy taught me a while ago called R&D, and that would be rip off and duplicate.
Yes, yes. There are various versions of those same statements. I can't remember what they are. And since I can't remember, I'm just saying I'm going to take your slide if you don't mind. So I guess, Kevin, we really bored people with our numbers. Nobody has any questions.
No questions.
They weren't wowed by them.
No.
I do have a comment, though. This is Nikki. I think that your numbers are phenomenal. I mean, I was just blown away by your ticket receipt amounts. I mean, obviously, you're a larger entity. Both of those areas have a lot more tickets than we do at 400 and something. I mean, we don't have near that many, but I mean, congratulations. It looks like you're doing a fantastic job.
Nikki, I will just say one thing to that, too, though. I understand why you would say that from your perspective, being in Alaska and so forth, but, you know, let's say that other states that don't have huge numbers and even some smaller areas like Sinclair mentioned, it doesn't take a lot of ticket holders to make a pretty big impact, you know,
exactly.
And in terms of the revenue. So I just want to say that to encourage you, really. That
oh, no, yeah. Well, we're at like 70,000 right now, which I think for us is pretty darn good because we only need,
it's really good.
Yeah.
But more for you and others, I would say, Nikki.
But like you mentioned, you know, the money just kind of keeps rolling in, and it does, and you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you just got a check for $10,000. Wow, didn't even realize, you know. I mean, it is, yeah.
I think the other thing, and Kevin, when we do this again, I think maybe it's important to make a statement about it's not the volume of numbers, because we're reporting numbers in terms of those numbers do not necessarily include people that were unassigned, moved out of state. You know, we toned that down because it was actual folks that we're working with. But if you look at the one area I was talking about, the rural area, I think she had 10 or 12 tickets assigned. She had 7 placements. And by the time the end of the grant, she had brought in $40,000. Now, that's significant, okay? That is. So that's a targeted effort. That is a targeted effort. And I think that it's real important for people to understand that assessment piece is not to weed people out. It's to get people in. It's to get the right people in who are ready for the program.
And I would even add to that, Sinclair, to say to get people to the resources that they need, whether it's us or whether it's VR or maybe other local resources, right?
Exactly. And I might not be ready today, but I might be ready in 2 years because of a seed that you planted in my head today. You know?
Yeah, love it. That's so true. Well, I appreciate the discussion from each of the leads that took time to put these materials together today. And I know we're at the top of the hour, a little beyond, so thank you for your patience and participation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Laura, I think, to
Great. Thank you, Kevin, Nikki, Sinclair, and Georgette. I just want to say something about that chart, too. I think what was so phenomenal to me was the number, and while you said cumulatively it was only 50, but the individuals who are now not on benefits. And that, I think, is huge and cool. And that's something that I think that we all have heard from the very beginning, less than half of the percent ever get off the roll. So that has to contribute to something. We do have a question, and I'll say that I want to say also, we tried today to record this presentation, and I will send just to the project leads a link to the recording, assuming it works, and a copy of the PowerPoint, because some people asked for that. We do have a question from, let me just see where to assist with. Actually, this is a good question. If people will bear with me, if you need to get off, please do. CERN Byron in Alabama, a round 4 project that are trying to start moving forward, actually, becoming an EN. And he asked, what type of training are DRCs receiving in order to assist with the benefits planning?
Ooh, well,
Kevin,
I guess I'll take
Cornell
that.
or VCU?
Yep. That's the right answer. I mean, I think, I guess there's lots of different training, but if you're talking about certification, certification process can be accomplished through Cornell University, distance-based, at a cost, of course, and also through VCU, the National Technical Assistance Center for the WIPA, Work Incentive Planning Assistance Project. And if there are seats available, then that can be free, but of course you have to get to the location. So those are 2 ways to get certified, but there's a lot of other training available if you just watch. And in fact, this is a great segue that you provided, because OSM has 2 trainings coming up on benefits basics, something that I'm really appreciating seeing them bring to the table, because it's such an important piece of this program, I think. So those are a few thoughts.
Yeah, Kevin, if you can get me the info from OSM on the benefits basics when I send out the PowerPoint and link to the recording, I can add that.
You got it.
Okay, and we'll do that. And Byron, certainly follow up with DJ if you want to learn more about the Cornell and the VCU training. So with that, thanks everyone. It was always great to hear what's going on. You always wonder when a grant starts, how are you going to make things happen? But today you just shared with us some great highlights of not only the promising practices, but the challenges, but in spite of the challenges, how you moved it forward. So great food for the soul. So thank you again, Georgette, Nikki, and Sinclair, and thank you for the rest of you for joining us. We will follow up, share the PowerPoint and a link to the recording and any other supporting materials. So with that, and thank you, Kevin, for facilitating and also sharing the numbers. And with that, we're going to end today's presentation, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day in summer. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.